Hello fellow Netrunners, today I'll be presenting a video guide on the final points of Android Netrunners rules. I'll be covering the triggers and interrupts, the various conditional abilities in Android Netrunner, and how their priority stacks up with each other. This video is aimed at slightly more inexperienced players, as well as players who don't get to play a lot and thus don't get to see these interactions in play very often. These could come up as rules questions during your regular play, and there is a way to resolve them logically if you know how. As it is, the rules document and FAQ document cover them all for the most part. However, the rules are scattered all over the place, and thus you might not be able to get a logical view of how to resolve these at a quick glance. So this is what I'm going to be covering today. Basically, if you ask yourself these questions, if you find yourself asking them fairly often, this is the video for you. So, can you use Polop to react against the Jackson Reds? Can you use Heartbeat to prevent damage before it is flipped face down by Apocalypse? Can you use Forger's ability to trigger guys before taking net damage from Snare? These are very common questions, and there are a lot more. And here is the quick lowdown of it for those of you who are short of time. Simultaneous triggers have the highest priority, and paid abilities have the lowest priority. Anything with lower priority cannot interrupt something with a higher priority. Of course, this is very vague, so let's conquer this one by one. Naturally, we'll start with the one with the highest priority, the one that cannot be interrupted, simultaneous abilities. These are denoted by the keywords and additional. Gain 2 credits for each credit loss, and take 2 tags. That's a count siphon. Deal 1 additional meat damage for the cleaners. Now, simultaneous abilities are special in that they don't take place immediately. They simply modify the resulting effect before any other triggers resolve. So what this means is basically for a count siphon, the gaining of 10 credits, assuming that you siphon for the full 10 credits, and the taking of 2 tags do not happen one after another, even though they're written that way. Because of the word and, they happen at the same time. They come as one package. They are inseparable. Same with cleaners. Say you play a Scorched Earth with cleaners in effect. Before anything else resolves, even before you reach your grubby hand out to the runner's grip in an attempt to do damage, cleaners modifies the Scorched Earth. So the Scorched Earth now reads deal 5 net damage, which is 4 plus 1. So this is how simultaneous abilities work. Prevent and avoid abilities have basically prevent and avoid as the keywords, naturally. And what they do is they jump the queue. Before an effect resolves, they interrupt the effect to negate it. This is unlike the lower priority triggers that I will discuss about later on, which stack or cascade onto the currently resolved effect. Prevent and avoid, in contrast, jumps the queue and resolves in its entirety before the prevented effect goes through its resolution. So, Crash Space, for example, reads prevent up to 3 net damage, meat damage, and New Angeles City Hall reads avoid 1 tag. All of these can only be triggered when the said effect occurs. You cannot trigger New Angeles City Hall unless you are actually about to take a tag. And when something does attempt to dish out a tag to you, you jump the queue, you say I want to avoid a tag, you resolve its effect, and then you proceed on with life. So that's how prevent and avoid effects work, and we see these 2 effects in play. Just for convenience sake, I'll number these in order of priority. Simultaneous effects have the highest priority at priority 5, followed by prevent and avoid effects at number 4. So, an interesting interaction is, when you perform an account siphon with New Angeles City Hall, can you use the credits you earn from the siphon to pay the avoiding of the tags? So, how does this work? Priority 5, simultaneous abilities trigger first. So, the 2 tags effect attaches itself to the gain 10 credits. Note that we are not resolving the effect caused by the simultaneous ability just yet. We are simply stating that the 10 credits and 2 tags must occur at the same time. We are simply keeping this fact in mind and that constitutes the resolution of our priority 5 simultaneous trigger. Then priority 4, the avoid effect attempts to resolve. And remember that since it's a prevent/avoid ability, it jumps the queue and resolves before the trigger that caused it, which is gain 10 credits and 2 tags. Just to reiterate, you must resolve the entire New Angeles City Hall ability, which is to pay 4 credits to avoid 2 tags. You must resolve this in your entirety, which means you cannot use the account siphon credits because the prevent and avoid jumps the queue. Another example is with cleaners and crash space. What happens when you take 2 meat damage from a source, say traffic accident or beyoken cover-up? Can you prevent all 3 damage with crash space? Priority 5 resolves first, simultaneous effects occurs. The cleaners attaches itself to, say, the traffic accident, modifying it and increasing its damage to 3. Thereafter, crash space attempts to prevent the 3 net damage. So it does so in its entirety, therefore you do prevent all 3 damage with crash space. So this is how timing triggers work. And now we'll go down the line to conditional triggers. These are of priority 3 and are marked by the keywords the first time, or when, or whenever. Tori Hanzo reads, the first time you would do any amount of net damage. Wildside reads, when your turn begins. These clue you into conditional triggers. Conditional triggers are becoming increasingly more relevant, especially with Mambat cycle. There are lots of cards that have when your turn begins triggers, and all these have to be resolved individually before anything else can proceed. And yes, resolve individually in their entirety. So let's see an interaction between priorities 3 and 4. The Tori Hanzo versus Deus Ex interaction. Say you're making a run on the server with a Tori Hanzo res and you are about to take 1 net damage. How do these resolve? Priority 4 triggers first, and that is the Deus Ex, which attempts to negate the net damage. So preventing the net damage occurs, followed by the conditional. The conditional states, at priority 3, the first time you would do any amount of net damage. It attempts to resolve this effect. However, because the Deus Ex has already prevented the net damage earlier, since it was of higher priority, Tori Hanzo's effect effectively fizzles and does not resolve. So you cannot deal any brain damage if the runner has negated the net damage with net damage prevention. Moving on to priority 2, sequential abilities. Now this again is another special one because it's not actually something that is technically defined in the rules text or the FAQ. You could say it's something I made up myself. But essentially what I'm trying to encompass here is anything that occurs in sequence. Examples of this are cards with multiple installs, such as Shipment from Mirrormorph, which reads, immediately install up to 3 cards. The installing of each of the 3 cards is sequential. This is stated in the FAQ. Another example of sequential effects are full stops in card text. I know this is very iffy, but in general, when there are full stops in card text, you should resolve the first sentence in its entirety before resolving the second. And this takes place at priority 2. So what does this mean for priority? Let's look at an interaction between Mambat City Hall and Heritage Committee, which is a very recent interaction. So how does this work? Search R&D for your Alliance card, reveal it, and play it. So you play the Heritage Committee. This means that you have to resolve this playing and installing in its entirety before you proceed on with any other text on Mambat City Hall, because Mambat City Hall is sequential. You must first play or install your card before you proceed to the next sentence, which is Shuffle R&D. As such, you trigger Mambat City Hall's ability, you draw 3 cards with Heritage Committee, paying the 1 credit cost, add 1 card from HQ to the top of R&D before you continue on resolving Mumbet City Hall's ability in its rest of its entirety, which is to shuffle R&D thereafter, which means that the card that you just placed on the top of your deck with Heritage Committee is now shuffled. So that is the interaction between the City Hall and the committee. Another more clear-cut example is here. Can you use Hasbaroy Engineering the Future's ability to gain 1 credit with which you can use to install the second piece of ice? Well, let's see how this happens. Since Mirror Morph is a sequential ability, you install each of the 3 cards in sequence. So after installing your first card, it triggers HB ETF's ability, which is of priority 3. This allows you to gain 1 credit since you install the card. Then you continue resolving Shipment from Mirror Morph in the rest of its entirety, which means that for the second and third install, you can potentially use the 1 credit that you gain from HB's ability in order to install an ice at a higher position. So this is how the interaction between priorities 2 and 3 work. Let's see the lowest priority, which is paid abilities. This is very ironic because paid ability is usually taken to mean lightning fast speed, but in this sense, it is actually the lowest of the priorities. What are paid abilities? Paid abilities are card text that are formatted as cost, effect, where the cost is generally bolded. This is represented by the green circular arrow in official Netrunner documents. So cards like self-modifying code feature this. The cost is 2 credits and trash this card, and the effect is search your stack for a program. Now, here's the tricky bit. This doesn't apply to every single cost effect card out there. Deus Ex is a very good counterexample of that. Even though it is formatted that way, it actually takes priority 4. It is a prevent avoid ability. So while it is technically still a paid ability, it actually occurs at prevent priority. Also, paid abilities are can be extended to include scoring agendas and card raising if it occurs at the correct juncture of the timing structure of a turn or a run. So you do refer to the official Netrunner timing structure for more information on this. But all of these, which is paid abilities, raising cards, and scoring agendas, occur at the same priority level. The difference between SMC and Deus Ex are most clearly shown in this example. When you access a snare with an SMC and Deus Ex installed, you may use the Deus Ex to prevent the net damage from snare because it is of priority 4. However, you cannot use SMC to tutor up a Deus Ex and then avoid the net damage if you're in the middle of an access because it's only of priority 1. In this case, you can see that snare is actually a priority 3 ability because it has the card text when the runner accesses snare. The keyword when clues it into being a conditional trigger. Therefore, it cannot be superseded by anything of lower priority such as SMC. However, it is superseded by the prevent ability of Deus Ex. So, with the entire priority tree covered, some of you more astute or more experienced players might be wondering, there's actually something of a lower priority, and there is. It's none other than click actions. These are the slowest of them all and take the lowest priority. Paid abilities can interrupt click actions, but cannot interrupt anything below that. This can be seen from a very common interaction, which is trying to use SMC to tutor up a clot in order to prevent the court from scoring fast advancing an agenda. When the court attempts to place an advancement token on a card using a click, this is considered a click action and is of priority 0. Therefore, it can be interrupted by a paid ability, such as using SMC to tutor up clot. which is of priority 1. This is why this interaction is possible, and this is why after every click or every advancement, the corp has to ask the runner if they have any reactions, because they have to know that the priority of SMC is greater than that of using a click to install or advance their agendas. Now that we have well and truly covered everything from priorities 0 to 5, let's return back to our opening slide. Can you apply your newfound knowledge to solve the problems that I mentioned at the beginning? Take a moment to pause this video, look up the cards on Netrunner DB, and figure this out for yourself. I will review the answers shortly. Well, let's start from the bottom of this list. The Geist, Forger, and Snare interaction is very interesting. Tricky as it may be, you can solve this with the same logic that we use for Account Cipher and New Angeles City Hall. Let's look at it logically. Priority 5 triggers first, and that occurs on Snare, which says do 3 net damage and give the runner 1 tag. The word and means that it's a simultaneous ability. So it executes first, and what it does is it glues the 3 net damage to the 1 tag, so they both must occur at the same time. They are inseparable, part of the same package. So now that is done, we do not resolve the ability yet, mind you. We are just placing them in the same package. We are saying these must occur at the same time. Now that we are done with priority 5, let's move on to priority 4, which is avoid 1 tag. So that triggers, and when that triggers, it cascades more triggers because it triggers Geist's ability, which states when you use a trash ability, which this is, you get to draw a card. So you must resolve the prevention along with all its cascading triggers in its entirety before the 3 net damage and 1 tag take place. So the correct sequence is you avoid the tag, which draws you a card. This allows you to draw up 1 more card before the 3 net damage lands. And of course, the 1 tag would land as well, but you prevented it, so avoided it rather, so that will not stick on you. And so yes, you will draw a card as Geist before the 3 net damage hits. The next question is slightly more tricky because it involves 3 levels of priority. The Heartbeat, Hostile Infrastructure, Apocalypse interaction works as such. First, the runner plays Apocalypse. This triggers a priority 2 sequential ability. It is a sequential ability because there's a full stop interrupting the 2 clauses. Trash all corp cards and turn all runner cards face down. So because it is a sequential ability, we resolve them one by one. We start with the one that was stated first, which is trash all installed corp cards. As we are resolving this, it triggers a priority 3 ability, which is whenever the runner trashes corp card. And this would resolve, except that it itself triggers a priority 4 ability, a prevent effect that occurs on Heartbeat. You prevent 1 damage by trashing an installed card. So what happens is Hostile Infrastructure triggers lots of times, and on each trigger, Heartbeat gets to trigger a lot of times as well. So this keeps going. Hostile Infrastructure triggers, Heartbeat triggers in reaction. Hostile Infrastructure triggers another time, Heartbeat triggers another time, and so on and so forth. Until all the corp cards are exhausted. At which point, we go back to the sequential ability of Apocalypse. Then we continue to turn all runner cards face down. So yes, Heartbeat can avoid the damage from hostile infrastructures before it is flipped face down by Apocalypse. Finally, the Pollock-Jackson-Howard interaction. Now, this is a trick question. You would quickly notice that this is all on the same priority. Rezzing Jackson-Howard is of priority 1. Political Operative's trash ability is a paid ability and is so on priority 1. Even Jackson's shuffle 3 cards back into R&D ability is also of priority 1. However, I haven't discussed what happens when multiple triggers of the same priority take place at the same time. Which resolves first? Well, that will have to be left for another video. If you found this video very informative and if you found it has cleared up a lot of your misunderstandings on Netrunner rules, be sure to do me a big favor by sharing it with your friends and anyone else who knows that plays Netrunner, to help the world learn more and hopefully ask less rules questions that are easily resolved by following a logical resolution structure. That's all I have for today. Thanks for watching and happy net running. Goodbye.